In 1903, Debussy published a piano triptych called Estampes, which means prints in French. And most Debussy scholars agree that this represents like a major sea change for the composer's piano music. So prior to 1903, almost all of the music Debussy wrote for solo piano exhibits a very neo-Baroque aesthetic. It's based on the harpsichord style of French composers like François Couperin in the 18th century. Clair de Lune is the one exception. It is the only piece that Debussy wrote for solo piano prior to the publication of Estampes that has a colorful title. Otherwise, the pieces are just called minuets or preludes or toccatas or sarabands, so on and so forth. So, yeah, this is a really, really important collection of three pieces. And the second movement is entitled La Soirée dans Grenade, which means evening in Granada. So where is Granada? Well, Granada is a city and a region in the very far south of Spain. And just a quick history lesson, in the 8th century, North African tribes under the banner of the Umayyad Caliphate conquered Spain. And they didn't just conquer some of it, they basically conquered the entire country. And over the next 700 years or so, there is this quest called the Reconquista to reclaim Islamic Spain for Christian Europe. And this was ultimately achieved by Ferdinand and Isabella, same of Christopher Columbus fame, in exactly 1492, believe it or not. However, as Spain is becoming less, as the Islamic forces in Spain are being beaten back across the Strait of Gibraltar over this period of centuries, the last holdout for Islamic dominance in Spain is the southern portion and Granada. And this city has a incredible fortress today that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site known as the Alhambra, which was built in the 13th century as a fortress. And so we know that Debussy, many European composers were obsessed with Spain in Debussy's era because it essentially represented a more immediate kind of exotic locale than, say, a place like Japan or China or even Indonesia. And lots of different composers who weren't Spanish tried their hand at writing Spanish pieces. Debussy spent a few hours as a teenager in northern Spain. He went to a bullfight, but that's all he ever spent there. And yet, he wrote this extraordinary piece of music that the actually Spanish composer, and probably most famous Spanish composer, Manuel de Falla, said for his money, it was the finest single-piece representation of the musical traditions of the country. So it's a really amazing achievement. Debussy really breaks out all the stops. He references so many different things from Spain. So because of the Islamic conquest of Spain, the North African tribes, they brought their musical scales with them, and they sound a lot different than ours, and oftentimes feature what we call a flat 2 scale degree. So the piece opens up also with a habanera rhythm that is omnipresent essentially throughout the piece. And the habanera is an Afro-Cuban dance that's kind of also has some elements of European Spain in it as well. But the main signifier of the habanera is this rhythm that goes. So this is throughout the piece. It's the way it opens. And now we're going to hear this Arab scale. Another thing, in addition to the scales that the North African tribes brought with them when they conquered Spain, was their ouds. Now, an oud is an instrument that's not exactly like a guitar, but it's pretty similar. And so, the Muslim conquest of Spain is an incredibly important moment in the history of the guitar in Europe. And ultimately, over time, the guitar, which was influenced by the North African invaders, becomes the signature instrument of the country, and still is so today. I mean, we still think about Spanish flamenco guitar, okay, before we think of French guitar playing or German guitar playing or Italian guitar playing. And so Debussy has the guitars going in La Soirée dans Grenade. And then the habanera. later in the piece, we even hear a section in castanets. And there is even a Spanish stomping dance just inserted in the middle of the piece. And it goes on from there. So this is really Debussy's one of his most beloved compositions. This is my single favorite Debussy piece by far. It is just absolutely gorgeous. And another thing that it's very interesting about it is you'll notice when you listen, like it seems like there are some really abrupt transitions between highly disparate music material, but Debussy really meant to do this. And this, many scholars have suggested that this shows the early influence of cinema, okay, which of course was invented in France at the very end of the 19th century. And this, with photography, with film, with new modes of transportation like the airplane or the city bus, there's just new ways of perceiving the world. And so Debussy felt like, these rapid cuts between sections almost gave it a kind of cinematic and a very modern feel to the piece.